I'm Nate.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. This is part 2 of our semi-lazy attempt to work our way through the IMDb list of the 250 top-rated films. We, on the last recording, went through number 200 through 201.
201 to 250.
201 to 250, and so now we're going to be counting down from 200 to
151.
150 or 151, or if we get bored or whatever happens over the course of the recording. This list is always up to change because it's based on the results
ratings,
of people submitting ratings to IMDb. So we are recording this particular episode on the 5th of December 2019. So some things may have changed in the rankings over the last time we consulted the list. So there could be some repeats, but we will acknowledge that if they crop up in the course of said podcast.
Yep. Well, starting out right at 200, number 200 is Finding Nemo. Not surprised that that's 200, that far down the list. It's a good film.
It's a good film.
Yeah, solid Pixar film.
I think most of these Pixar films probably, and this is something I've noticed with this list, is new films that are well received will show up kind of high on the list, and as time goes on, they'll work their way down because they become less. Not everybody's thinking about them. This is a good film. Pixar films are all but certainly strong.
Yeah.
I've said before that Pixar is like the last studio where you will go and see the film on the strength of the studio that produced it.
Yep. Yeah.
But it's a fun film. Albert Brooks, Ellen DeGeneres, fish on a journey to rescue a son of a fish, voiced by Albert Brooks.
Yep.
Later spawned a sequel. Solid movie. I saw it theatrically when it first came out. I mean, those coral reef scenes and the CGI on a big screen are something.
Yeah, it's a good film.
Number 199, Kill Bill Volume 1. Kill Bill was originally to have been one film, but it just kind of grew, and so a decision was made to slice it in half. Volume 1 came out in 2003. Not a great fan of this film. It's one of, if not, the Kill Bill films are one of, if not, my least favorite of the Quentin Tarantino films.
We're in the same camp on that. This isn't the style from Quentin Tarantino that I really enjoy. But yeah. Number 198, Internal Affairs from 2002. Are you familiar with this one?
Infernal Affairs. This is
Infernal Affairs.
This is from China, right?
I have no clue.
It's from Hong Kong. Yes, I have seen this. This is the film that the Martin Scorsese film The Departed was based on. It's the same story. It's quite good. As good or better than the remake. Number 197, Memories of Murder, 2003. This is a Korean film. I actually have seen this film. It is about basically a murder spree in South Korea in the mid-1980s. It plays out against the backdrop of some political happenings there at that time, some protests. Really good. Deserves to be on the list.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. Nor am I familiar with number 196, Muna Bai, MBBS. Are you familiar with this one?
I am not. This appears to be a Bollywood film. It categorizes itself as a comedy drama musical. It's got a running time of 156 minutes because the Indians, they like their movies long.
Yeah. Ooh.
195, Hotel Rwanda from 2004, starring Don Cheadle.
Yep.
Based on a true story about a hotel manager in Rwanda who saved many Tutsis.
Yep.
During
the Tutsi refugees.
Yeah, this horrible instance of genocide that just occurred so quickly. It's like all of a sudden the Hutus were killing the Tutsis. It was long-standing animus between the two groups, which they discuss in the film, were divided by the previous Belgian overlords in the colonial days. And the Tutsis had the lighter skin, and so they were privileged by the Belgians, and the Hutsis were kind of lower class. And that resentment festered under the surface for a long time until various events, including the death of the president of Rwanda, an airplane crash, triggered the riots.
Yeah.
Very strong film.
Good film. Definitely deserves to be in the top 250.
Yeah, Don Cheadle's best work.
Yeah. 194, $1 Million Baby.
Good movie.
Yep. Good movie. Clint Eastwood is the director. Also stars in it alongside Hilary Swank, Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
Yeah, female boxer film. It's got an ending that people talk about, and I didn't see this film for months and months until after it came out. I'm pretty sure I saw it theatrically. And somehow I had not had the ending spoiled to me, and I will not spoil it for you in the off chance you do not know how this movie ends. Another film with an even more ambiguous ending, I suppose, is number 193, No Country for Old Men from 2007. This is the film for which the Coen brothers finally won their directorial Oscar. Did they share it?
I don't recall.
Won Best Film. That's for certain.
It won the Oscar for Best Motion Picture, Best Performance in an Actor in a Supporting Role for Javier Bardem, Best Achievement in Directing for Ethan and Joel Coen, and Best Writing in an Adapted Screenplay, again, both Joel and Ethan Coen.
Yeah, this is based on a novel by Cormac McCarthy, who's very dark.
Yeah.
This is a dark film. It's set in 1980. It has to do with some money stolen from drug dealers and how it changes hands. And it's dark, but it is an excellent movie.
Are you surprised by its ranking here?
No, it seems about right for it. I mean, it's been a dozen years since it came out. It's very strong.
Yeah.
It's a great mood piece. I love the early 80s setting. I love some of the characters. Javier Bardem, this is the film that made him known internationally. One thing that I really liked about this film is they have Tommy Lee Jones plays this old sheriff. And he is reflecting on the world and how bad things seem to be getting. And there's this sense, even though it's a period piece, even though it's set back in 1980, of an impending apocalypse about the entire piece, which is not something you see that often in period films. And I just like that because it's so different. This idea of this almost tangible sense of things ending, in the past, and we know they didn't end.
Yeah.
But I like that juxtaposition.
Next on our list, number 192, is the 2007 film Into the Wild, directed by Sean Penn. I don't think I've seen this one.
This was my favorite film of 2007.
Yeah.
This is based on a book. This is based on a novel of the same name by a man named John Krakauer. He also wrote Into the one about the Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Into.
Hold on.
He likes Into to be part of the title. Into Thin Air.
Yes.
He also wrote a book about Mormon fundamentalism called Under the Banner of Heaven. Into the Wild is based on a true story of a man. He was a college student in Georgia. He graduates, and then he kind of disappears from his family's life. He came from kind of a broken home, and he decides to head out on his own and kind of travel, hitchhike around America. So there's a certain episodic quality to it as he travels around and meets different people. He's in Minnesota for a while, and he works at a grain silo, and he meets Vince Vaughn, and then he meets some kind of hippie people, one of which is Catherine Keener, and then he stays with this old man played by Hal Holbrook, and just the friends he meets as he travels around, and he's working his way up to Alaska, and it's kind of infamous the way this guy dies. He tracks himself into the wilds of Alaska. He's got all these books about what you can and can't eat because he wants to live off the land.
Yeah.
But he misreads a berry or something like that. He eats something that ends up to be poisonous, basically shuts down his digestive system, so he slowly starves to death. And he's so isolated and doesn't have enough energy that he is trapped. And he stays in this bus out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how this bus got there, but it serves as shelter. And he wrote basically a diary of himself as he died. And eventually his body was found. In a kind of macabre twist, this bus out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska has become kind of a pilgrimage destination, which is not entirely appropriate.
Yeah.
But this is a really solid movie. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Number 191, How to Train Your Dragon from 2010. It started a franchise, which I have seen none of, but my niece and nephews are fans.
I've seen none of it either, so we'll move on to number 190 from 2009, Mary and Max. I'm not familiar with this.
I have seen this. This is a stop-motion animation film. It's from Australia.
Really? Huh.
It gives the impression of being... It is very loosely based on a true story about a little, in this case, a girl from Australia who picks a name out of a phone book to be a pen pal, And it is a man in New York City. This is in like the 1980s when this happened and this set. This man has all sorts of psychological problems, but they become pen pals. And it's moving. It's also a little bit disturbing at parts. It's really unusual for an animated film. I highly recommend. 189, Hayachi, A Dog's Tale, with Richard Gere and Joan Allen. I've heard of this, based on a true story. I don't know much about it beyond.
I know nothing about it. I'm surprised that I've never heard of it with Richard Gere in it.
And to be this high, to be on the list at all.
Yeah.
It must be better than I would have thought.
Evidently. Number 188 from 2010, Shutter Island.
I have an interesting Shutter Island story. So I went to see Shutter Island on a Thursday. This was in March of 2010. So this would have been March 11th, 2010. On March 14th, 2010, I am in a serious car accident. I end up being put into medically induced coma. I have to have brain surgery. There's a lot of fallout, obviously, from this incident. When I was awake, there were a period of days in which I was coming in and out of consciousness. And once I was finally solidly awake and knew what day it was like 9 days later. And at one point, the doctors and stuff and friends and family are talking to me, and they're trying to figure out what I remember. And the last thing I could remember was seeing Shutter Island. It's almost like it was the landmark in my schedule, like a mountain. It's like I could see this because I know I saw this movie in the theater. And then over the course of a few days, I regained the days after that. I remember the rest, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday up until probably about an hour before getting in the car accident. I never got that hour back. It's been almost 10 years. But that is why I will never forget Shutter Island, which I don't really like. I really think it's a substandard Martin Scorsese film.
Yeah.
Not really a fan.
Yeah.
It should have worked. Didn't work for me.
It's been long enough since I've seen it. I don't recall what I thought of it. But yeah, I've seen it, but I don't recall what I thought of it. Yeah.
I'm afraid to revisit
Interesting
it.
connection.
I'm afraid to revisit it.
You know, I didn't hear back. What was it? It was like a month after your accident before I heard about it.
Mm.
I didn't, like, in fact...
Why do you stop calling me?
Well, Nate and I would have regular phone conversations because he was living in Boise at the time and I was here in Salt Lake. And it was like a month between phone calls. And I was like, why isn't Nate calling me anytime? Like, I've called and left him messages.
He's not on Facebook. What's going on?
Well, I wasn't on Facebook back then.
Mm.
But I'd called and left you a number of messages. And it was getting to the point where I was going to pull out an old book that I had that had your parents' phone numbers in it so that I could call your parents' house to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
And then you called me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Number 187, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2 from 2011.
I assume we'll end up seeing some of the others on this franchise there. Personally, I really like the Harry Potter franchises, though the Deathly Hallows movies were not my favorite in the franchise.
Yeah, I would say Deathly Hallows Part 1 is probably better than Deathly Hallows Part 2. There was a little sense of underwhelmness with the resolution of it, and perhaps how could there not have been?
Yeah, although the ending, like the very ending in the train station, that's a nice wrap-up.
That's nice. I'd kind of like to see them bring everybody back together in a couple of years and refilm it with them at the actual ages they were supposed to be.
Yeah. Number 186 from 2008, Gran Torino, directed by Clint Eastwood. I actually have not seen this in totality.
You've not seen this?
I've seen most of it, but not all of it.
So it is about Clint Eastwood plays a former Detroit auto worker who's retired, and his neighborhood is, the ethnic makeup is changing. The Hmong, who are an ethnic people from Southeast Asia, have become very prominent in his neighborhood. And he's this crusty old white guy who eventually befriends some of the Hmong. It's quite good. You watch this film, and you can tell Clint Eastwood thought this was going to be the last film that he acted in.
Yeah.
It has that swan song quality to it.
Yeah.
Really good. So 185, Mad Max Fury Road from 2015. This movie is one big eccentric car chase. It's pretty fun, very kinetic.
Yeah, you liked it though?
Some people liked it a lot more than I did. I liked it, but some people are just fanatic about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. Number 184 from 2013, the movie Prisoners. Did you see this one?
This is good. Yeah, have you not seen this?
No, I've seen it. I was curious to see what your take on it was. I liked it. I don't remember what I would have rated it. I didn't rate it on IMDb at the time, but yeah, I remember I liked this film.
Yeah, it's a dark, somber film about a child gone missing and the effect of that on two families. The guy that directed this, his name is Dennis Villanova.
Villanueva.
He directed, if memory serves, a film that you rather like called The Arrival.
Oh yeah, is that? Yep.
Yeah, he also did the Blade Runner sequel and
Incendies
Sicario.
and Sicario, which you
So
like.
he's solid.
Yeah.
This is really a different kind of film, too. In the broadest of strokes, it sounds like it could be a TV movie.
Yeah.
But they make it deep and painful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pain in the lives of these characters. 183, The Help from
I've never seen
2011. You've never seen The Help?
No.
Help's a little bit of a charged movie. It is about kind of a revolt of black household workers in the South in the 1950s. It is the film that made Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer household names.
Mm-hmm.
I know Viola Davis, who's subsequently won Oscars, has said she regrets being in this film.
Really? I think I missed that. I assumed just from the get-go, the cast, that you probably liked this film just because Bryce Dallas Howard's in it.
I have mixed feelings about this film. This film has a lot of redheads in it. It's got Bryce Dallas Howard. It's got Emma Stone. It's got Jessica Chastain, though Jessica Chastain is a blonde in this film.
Yeah.
Really, I think the first film that I knew who she was. And watching this film, you can just tell she's going to go on to be a star.
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't have that much to do in the film. It's not the kind of part that she'd probably play today, but she has a presence.
Yeah, at the time that this came out, I kind of had this weird attitude of, if everyone loves it, I'm just not going to see it.
It was based on a very popular book.
Yes. Number 182 on the list. I'm surprised it's down at 182. I love this film. It's a hard film to watch, but I love it. From 2015, Spotlight.
This would have been my favorite film of 2015.
I still like this film quite a bit. This, of course, is the true story of when the Boston Globe uncovers the extent of the child abuse scandal within the Catholic Church in the Boston area, and even to some extent outside of Boston. It's a tough subject matter, well-executed movie,
Very
great true story.
Yeah, and a really good ensemble cast. You got Mark Ruffalo, you got Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Liv Schreiber. It's a horrible story about how these priests were moved around and protected while they abused children for many years. This story broke. It's a film that kind of like All the President's Men.
Yeah.
It's about the importance of investigative journalism.
Oh, yeah.
And this was really a watershed moment. Things changed. There was before this Boston Globe article and after it in terms of the public understanding of the priest's abuse situation. One thing, as a side note, that I remember liking about the film is, so this is set principally in the late 90s, the early 2000s.
Yeah.
You look at the technology, the computers and things, like, wow, it's not that long ago, and it looks quaint.
Yeah.
Like, it's nostalgically quaint. And there's, of course, 9/11 happens
While they're
investigating, and they take them off of the story for a couple months because you just, all hands on deck to cover the war on terror and the aftermath of 9/11. So this story probably would have come out in late 2001 had 9/11 not happened, but instead it came out in early 2002.
Yeah. Well, and this, both the article and the movie kind of becomes a little bit of a watershed moment in how a lot of people view organized religions, period. Not just the Catholic Church, but organized religions in general, and how they view them and certain things that can, certain abuses that can happen within them. So
it represents a loss of trust,
yep.
Which is something that's plagued organized religion, especially in the last 20 or so years. Number 181, Rush. This is the Ron Howard film about a race car rivalry in the 70s.
In the Formula One drivers, James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Did you see this movie?
No, not seen it.
This is a good movie. You should add this to your list.
I remember seeing previews for it and being like, racing movie. I feel similar about this Ford versus Ferrari. I'm like,
Well, it's a similar story, but I think this one will be better. Ron Howard's a solid director.
He is a solid director.
And I would say bet on this one in terms of Ron Howard's ability to direct a film. I was quite impressed with it. I saw it in the theaters. I really enjoyed it. It was a good film. Number 180, I also have not seen this one, 12 Years a Slave from 2013.
Yes, this is directed by Steve McQueen, not the Steve McQueen of action movies of yore, but a British director by that name. It is based on a memoir of Solomon Northup. It's a true story. He was a free black man that traveled down south. He was a musician. Some people got him drunk and basically said that he was a slave and sold him. And it took him a dozen years to work his way home and to regain his freedom. It's a rough movie, man. It's rough. It did win Best Picture Oscar, and I'm blanking the name of the woman that won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for this. She's half Kenyan, half Mexican. Very dark-skinned woman, beautiful woman.
Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah, and that's a name I don't want to attempt. Yeah. I'm bad with some names. She's in this. Let's see, there's a number of other people that are in it. Brad Pitt is in it. He also was a producer on it. What's his name? The lead, Chetwa Elijah4. Scott McNairy. Oh, Benedict Cumberbatch is in it. Michael Fassbender plays a pretty vile slave owner. Sarah Paulson plays his wife. Paul Dano is also in this. It's good. 179, Hacksaw Ridge. I have not seen this. I've heard of it.
I haven't seen it either. It was somewhat well received at the time within certain circles. But
Mel Gibson directed, 2016, so not that old. Andrew Garfield. It is about a man who was a conscientious objector for World War II who ends up going into service as a medic.
Yeah, in the Battle of Okinawa, which, if you know much about World War II, was rough. So, number 178 on this list, Gone Girl.
Gone Girl, solid movie based on a popular book.
Yeah, disturbing but good.
This film, after I saw it, I'm like, Rosamund Pike's going to be in everything. It didn't happen. She could have gone totally mainstream after the success of this film, but instead she has been very selective in what she's chosen to do. They've not generally been particularly successful films financially. She was in that one about the investigative journalist who lost her eye.
Yeah.
She was in that one about the plentiful hostages in Uganda.
Oh yeah.
She just hasn't done mainstream fare. She's also a former Bond girl.
Yeah.
She was in
Die Another Day.
Die Another Day, one of the 2 or 3 worst Bond movies. Number 177, The Grand Budapest Hotel. It's a Wes Anderson film. It is based loosely on the work of an actual writer whose name I'm blanking. Stefan Zweig, who was a writer in Central Europe in the years leading up to the Second World War. It's a comedy. It has Ralph Fiennes in it.
Ralph Fiennes, yeah.
Ralph Fiennes. I think it's pronounced Ray. Memory serves me correctly.
I thought
it's
Ray
spelled
Fiennes
out
was
Ralph,
different.
but it's pronounced Ray. Anyway, he is great in it. Very seldom do you see a performance that's a comic performance that you feel like this is a legitimate contender for Best Actor Oscar. He was not nominated. He should have been. It's one of the great performances because he's not a comic actor, and he is hilarious in it. It's about various happenings in a exclusive hotel in Central Europe in the days leading up to a massive war. It's also the only film I can think of that is told in triple flashback. So you have a beginning with a lady visiting a grave or memorial to a great writer in roughly the present day. It flashes back to an interview with this writer in probably the early 1980s that's being recorded for TV. Then flashes back to, and in that interview, he tells a story that it flashes back to about how he visited the Grand Budapest Hotel in the 1960s when that made-up country was a communist state. And this hotel had seen better times. And he meets a guy there who tells him a story, the third flashback, that he turns into the novel The Grand Budapest Hotel. And these multiple flashbacks, I think, are largely excuses for actors who wanted to say they had been in a Wes Anderson movie. So you have F. Murray Abraham and Tom Wilkinson in these framing flashbacks. The rest of the cast is very strong. You've got Jeff Goldblum. He plays a character in this film called Deputy Kovacs. Jeff Goldblum was in a television movie in the early 1980s about Ernie Kovacs, who was a comedian popular on television in the 50s, who, while he was doing a comedy series on TV, was spending his off hours looking for his children who had been abducted by his ex-wife. So that seems to be an in-joke It's also got Harvey Keitel, Bill Murray, Jude Law, Jason Schwartzman, Saoirse Ronan, Tilda Swinton, an incredible cast. Enjoyable film, really eccentric sense of humor to it. Very Wes Anderson. I would recommend it.
Yeah, number 176 on the list is from 2014, a movie called PK. I'm not even remotely familiar with this one.
Appears to be a science fiction film. Looks like it's probably from India. Number 175 is Wild Tales. This is, if memory serves, somewhere in Latin America. I remember reading a review of it around the time it came out. This is a 2014 release. It's 6 little vignettes. Probably good. It's 175 on the list.
Number 174 on the list is from 2015, the movie Room, starring Brie Larson. Again, this is another movie with really rough subject matter, but it's really well executed. It is a good film. It's worth your time to watch. The book is also extremely good, but again, the subject matter is extremely rough.
I have not seen it. I've heard good things about both it and the book that it's based on. Of course, this is the film that Brie Larson won her Oscar for. If you saw Captain Marvel, I don't think she was particularly impressive in that. I think the part was probably underwritten, but she is a very solid actress. There was another film that I saw her in recently. I'm blanking the name of it, but it reminded me she certainly can act.
Yeah. She also recently was on an episode of Running Wild with Bear Grylls.
Indeed.
Yeah. Which is, if you're not familiar with that show, it's Bear Grylls doing long-form interviews with actors and actresses that he takes into the backcountry and does long-form interviews while they're in survival situations.
Is that a TV show or a YouTube series? 'Cause it sounds like a YouTube
show.
Series.
Yeah.
And The Glass Castle was the name of the Brie Larson movie I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
173 Logan. This is the swan song, the farewell of Hugh Jackman to the character that made him an international star, the Wolverine, also known as Logan. It's directed by James Mangold, who directed the remake of 3:10 to Yuma.
Oh, really?
He also did one of the earlier Wolverine films, the one where the Wolverine goes to Japan. These are the two most solid Wolverine films.
The two Wolverine films that I haven't seen.
I have not seen, yeah. I would highly recommend it. It's really strong. One of the things I liked about both this and the previous James Mangold X-Men movie is that he makes the mutants seem special. And a lot of them, they're mutants fighting mutants, and they're just like, there's too much of that. These films, there's not a lot of mutants. They are the exception to the rule, and you get the sense of them being the other. And this, it's an apocalyptic near future. Society is in a slow decline. It's kind of a beautiful movie. I highly recommend it.
Number 172 on the list from 2016, a movie called The Handmaiden. I'm not familiar with this one.
Appears to be Japanese. It's about an heiress. I know nothing about this movie. 171, Sherlock Jr. from 1921. This is a Buster Keaton film about a film projectionist who turns into a detective. And I actually have seen this film on the big screen at the Egyptian Theater in downtown Boise, Idaho. I brought a date.
Yeah, good movie.
Good movie.
Yeah,
it's very funny.
Number 170 on the list from 1925, a Charlie Chaplin film. Charlie Chaplin directs it and stars in it, called Gold Rush. Not seen it.
Solid film. You should see it. It's about various comic happenings in the Klondike Gold Rush. There is a scene in which him and this other guy are trapped in a cabin, and the guy that he's with hallucinates that Charlie Chaplin is a chicken, and then you got Charlie Chaplin in a chicken suit, and they're running around, and he's trying to eat him. And funnier than that sounds. Yeah. Chaplin can pull that kind of stuff off.
Yeah.
Number 169, The Passion of Joan of Arc from 1928. This is a film by the Scandinavian director Carl Theodor Dreyer, who had a tendency to make films about religious topics. I have not heard it, seen this film. Obviously, I've heard of it. There's supposed to be some great cinematography in it, a lot of extreme close-up at a time where that was not super common. It's on my list.
Yeah. Number 168 from 1948, The Red Shoes. I'm not familiar with this one.
This is a Powell Pressburger film. Michael Powell is arguably my favorite director. This is not my favorite of their films. It stars Norma Shear, or Moira Shear, who was a ballet dancer. She'd go on to appear in one or two more of Michael Powell's films. It's a story of obsession. It's a musical. It's got very vivid colors. A lot of people really love this film. Martin Scorsese is a big fan of this film. I want to say my grandmother liked this film. Not for all tastes, but beautiful to look at, unusual. 167, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. John Huston directed his father, Walter Huston, in this film. He co-stars with Humphrey Bogart. It's about some expatriate Americans hard on their luck in Mexico. They get a hold of a treasure map. They decide to go out and find the treasure and end up going kind of crazy with greed and turning against each other. When we were watching March of the Penguins a few weeks back, there was a bonus feature that was an old cartoon. Was it a Bugs Bunny cartoon?
Yes.
Bugs Bunny finds a penguin, and he's trying to get the penguin home. And there's this recurring gag where they meet this character that is Humphrey Bogart from this movie, who keeps repeating this line about how spare a couple of bucks for a poor American. This is the movie from which that joke derives.
Number 166 from 1949, White Heat. I'm not familiar with this one. It's a James Cagney. Do you know much about it?
Yeah, I've seen this. This is probably the last great gangster film that James Cagney made. He had gotten sick of them. He'd been typecast. He did not want to make this film. He did agree to make it. It's a classic. It's the film from which the oft-parodied line, "Top of the world, Ma," comes. 165, All About Eve. This won the Best Picture Oscar in 1950. It is directed by Joseph Mankiewicz. It is the story of Bette Davis, who is a established Broadway star. She has a protege played by Anne Baxter, who is basically plotting to usurp her star status. George Sanders is in it, as is Celeste Holm, who'd won Best Supporting Actress a couple of years earlier in A Gentleman's Agreement. Solid film, but I prefer another film about actors and actresses. It came out the same year, Sunset Boulevard by Billy Wilder. I think that is the superior film and should have won the Oscar that year.
Number 164 on the list, Rashomon from 1950, Akira Kurosawa. Mm-hmm. I recognize the name of the director, but I'm not familiar with this film.
This is the story about a group of people. You've seen versions of this. A lot of sitcoms would do their Rashomon episode, where it's a bunch of people. They're being questioned, I want to say, by police about a murder or a death. It's been a while since I've seen this. And they tell the story differently. So it's about personal biases coloring the way you perceive events. Pretty solid. It's only 88 minutes. Yeah. Worth seeing. A lot of Kurosawa's films run a lot longer. 163, Ace in the Hole from 1951. This is a Billy Wilder film. Came out the year after Sunset Boulevard. Sunset Boulevard was pretty well received. At the time this came out, Ace in the Hole was not that well received. It was considered excessively cynical for the age. You watch this film and you're like, this is from 1951. This is dated. It is about a reporter played by Kirk Douglas, who'd been a reporter on some big city papers, and he offended people, and he's worked his way down to where he's at some small paper in Arizona or New Mexico. And there's a man who's become stranded in a mine after a partial collapse, who was rummaging down there looking for artifacts or something. And Kirk Douglas comes up with this idea to keep him down there longer to sell more papers. It's a cynical film.
Yeah. Number 162 on the list is Tokyo Story. I'm not familiar with this one either. It's from 1953. Do you know much about this?
I know the name. I know it's well thought of, but I've not seen it.
I'm kind of... I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'm kind of surprised by some of these mid-list ones. There's some in that 200 to 250 range that I thought would have been up higher. I'm surprised how many in this group of 50 that we're looking at right now that I'm not familiar with at all.
Yeah.
So.
And there was that weird clunk of chunk of silent films in kind of the middle 160s or 170s. Number 161, Dial M for Murder. This is an Alfred Hitchcock film. Was originally released or to be released in 3D. You can tell when you see it, some of the camera angles. They're obviously trying for the trick shots. It is based on a play, I think. It's got Ray Milland, Grace Kelly, Robert Cummings. It's about a man plotting to kill his wife.
Number 160 from 1957, The Seventh Seal, an Ingmar Bergman film. Stars Max von Sydow. I haven't seen this, but I've heard of it.
It's a great film. This is the movie in which the European knight plays chess with death.
Oh, yeah.
So it's been lampooned many times. It's very solid. It's set in, I want to say, the 11th century. This knight is on his way home from the Crusades, meets death. The plague is infecting the area. There's a group of traveling performers that become involved. Like many of Bergman's films, it's actually relatively short, at least at this period in his career. It's only 96 minutes. I believe I saw it in a Western Civilization course in college.
Really?
159, another Bergman film, Wild Strawberries. This one is really good. This one I own, actually. It is about a professor. He was a medical doctor. He lives in northern Sweden. He is going to be awarded an honorary degree from his alma mater. He's a widower. He travels down with a lady a niece? I forget the connection. But they travel down to the big city for him to receive this award. And there's various flashbacks about his career as a doctor. And he used to be a very beloved doctor. And then he had a marriage that went bad. And like a lot of Bergman films, it's very reflective, not super happy, most of it.
Yeah.
There are moments of happiness in it, but kind of a downer.
Yeah. Number 158, it's a familiar director name at this point, Billy Wilder from 1959, Some Like It Hot, of course starring Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
I've seen this not for quite a few years, but yeah.
Yeah, so Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon. It was on an AFI list a few years ago, or maybe more than a few years ago, but I've seen it voted the best comedy of all time. One of my favorite stories about this film is Billy Wilder was a very hot director at this time, and so when he goes to the studio to sell them on the idea of this new movie, it's a comedy about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And the executive, well, we know you know what you're doing.
Wow.
157, Judgment at Nuremberg, Stanley Kramer film. He made a lot of films about significant issues in the 60s. He made Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. He also made It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which was not about significant issues. But this film is about the Nuremberg trials, a certain substrata of some low to mid-level judicial people. It's got Spencer Tracy in it. It's got Burt Lancaster, Richard Widmark, Marlena Dietrich. It's also got Judy Garland looking not particularly healthy. Very solid film. It is quite long. It's 179 minutes. It was remade for TV a number of years ago with Alec Baldwin.
Number 156 is Yojimbo. Again, another Kurosawa film from 1961. I'm not familiar with this one.
I've heard the name. It's one of his samurai films. It's 156 on the list, so I'm sure it's good. 155, The Great Escape from 1963, directed by Jason Sturgis, starring Steve McQueen, James Gardner, Richard Attenborough, Charles Bronson, and a heck of a lot of other people. I believe it's very loosely based on a true story. It's about a POW escape attempt from a German, it's not a POW, POW camp.
Yeah.
During the Second World War. Epic. So I've only seen it one time. I was just the other day. I was thinking about I really need to rewatch this movie.
Yeah, good film. Number 154 is titled Andrei Rublev, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. I'm not familiar with this one. That's from 1966.
The little summary says that it's the lifetimes and afflictions of the 15th century Russian iconographer Saint Andrei Rublev. So I'm pretty sure this would have made it a Soviet film. I'm not familiar with this one.
Yeah.
153, Chinatown. You have not seen Chinatown.
No.
You must see Chinatown. Directed by Roman Polanski. It stars Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, John Huston. It's an iconic film. Even though you have not seen it, you've kind of seen it because the basic plot is the criminal plot from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's funny.
They took it and adapted it. I highly recommend this film.
Yeah. Number 152, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This is well known. I don't think we need to say too much about this film. Yeah, everyone's heard lines from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I've only ever seen it once.
Yeah?
I was on a bus trip for debate in high school. and the sound wasn't always great.
Yeah.
I need to revisit it. It is.
You can borrow this one from me.
It's very. People love this film.
Yeah.
It's a major cult film.
There are parts that are worthy of its reputation, and there's parts of it that are. I mean, it's British comedy. It's dry, but there are certainly some funny parts. So.
Yeah, I remember it being a little uneven. Number 151 is Stalker, 1979. This also appears to be Russian. The summary on IMDb says a guide leads two men through an area known as the Zone to find a room that grants wishes. I know nothing further about this film.
Yep. Well, that concludes this group of 50 films. So our next one will be, our next episode of the IMDb Top 250 will be film numbers 150 through 101.
Sounds good.
What do you think of this one? Any big surprises on this to you?
No, there's one of the great things about this list is that it's all over the place, from popular films that everybody knows to obscure films, often films that are from a particular region, Japanese or China, films that may not have penetrated far out of their home countries, but are classics there.
Yeah.
So I love the eclecticism of this list.
Nice. All right, well, that concludes this episode of Rob and Nate Record a Podcast and this episode of IMDb Top 250.
I'm Nate.
And I'm Rob. See you next time.